الأمير ليس مستغربا.
لا عم بصير 7 أياد بشكل آخر.
Good afternoon on this Thursday, May 8th. I'm Yumna Naufal and these are today's headlines. Lebanese Forces Chief Samir Jaja is ready to withdraw from the presidential race if a deal is reached to back the candidacy of another March 14 candidate. The Syndicate Coordination Committee launches a week-long and nationwide strike to protest the proposal of a ministerial parliamentary committee to cut the raise by $700 million. And an explosion in northern Syria hits the Carlton Hotel that government troops used as a military base, along with several other buildings in a government-held area in Aleppo. Lebanese Forces leader Samir Jaja says he is ready to withdraw from the presidential race if a deal is reached to back the candidacy of another March 14 alliance member. This comes after a meeting with Maronite Patriarch Bashar al-Rai in Kirki. He also expressed readiness to discuss any proposal that leads to the election of a Syria's president to avoid vacuum. Jaja stated that his candidacy is not a challenge to anyone and that his program is very clear. He hoped that the Patriarch would be able to convince the parties that have been causing lack of quorum at Parliament to attend legislative sessions aimed at electing a head of state. The LF leader also criticized the campaign launched against the Patriarch over his planned visit to the Palestinian territories later this month. Rai has repeatedly said that it is his duty as Patriarch to visit Jerusalem, stressing he was not seeking to normalize ties with the Jewish state. Foreign Minister Gibran Bassil meets with Saudi Ambassador to Lebanon, Ali Awad Assiri, at his office in the ministry. Assiri left without making any statement, but MP Michel Aoun's Free Patriotic Movement has adopted a policy of openness towards Saudi Arabia since last year. This is Assiri's first official visit to Bassil's office in the ministry. And the FPM has also been trying to convince the Future movement, which is close to Saudi Arabia, to endorse Aoun as a president. The Syndicate Coordination Committee is launching a week-long and nationwide strike to protest the proposal of a ministerial parliamentary committee to cut the raise by $700 million. While public schools and most state institutions went on strike, private schools remained open. The Syndicate Coordination Committee warns that authorities' official exams will not be held as long as demands on the pay raise are not met. The SEC, as it is called, also is urging its supporters to participate in a peaceful day of rage next Wednesday. The demonstrators will march from the area near the Association of Banks in Lebanon to Parliament in Nijmeh Square. The Parliament will convene next Wednesday to discuss the recommendations of the committee. A response training exercise aimed at dealing with a tsunami inflicting heavy casualties and structural damage was performed in the coastal city of Biblos Jbeil. The exercise simulates that a 7-degree earthquake struck 200 kilometers from Lebanese coast, causing a tsunami to arrive 20 minutes later. The simulation first showed how the Civil Defense and Red Cross would work to evacuate local schools. It then moved down to the seashore where damage was simulated with boats pushed on shore and a damaged car, as well as debris floating in the water and on land. The Civil Defense Forces and Army checked the seafront while the Army leadership coordinated from their command room. Military investigative judge Imad Zain is issuing arrest warrants for a senior Abdullah Azam Brigade's commander and 4 accomplices in connection with the deadly 2013 Bir Abed and Weiss car bombings. The warrants were issued against Naim Abbas, who is the alleged mastermind behind 2 other devastating bombings in the Beirut southern suburb of Har Tahrik on January 2nd and January 21st, respectively. Abbas has been in custody since February 12th and has already been charged in connection with the Har Tahrik explosions. An explosion in northern Syria hits the Carlton Hotel that government troops used as a military base, along with several other buildings in a government-held area. The explosion struck on the edge of a contested old neighborhood in Aleppo. The hotel was completely destroyed in the blast, and there are casualties among the troops. Meanwhile, more rebels are expected to leave the central city of Homs as the evacuation of opposition fighters moves into its second day. Homs Governor Talal Barazi says that the evacuation process is being conducted in a positive atmosphere. He added that Homs will be declared a secure city once the army moves in later on Thursday. Ahmed Jarba, the head of the National Coalition of the Syrian Opposition, opens a week of meetings and public appearances in the U.S. Capitol with an impassioned call for weapons to help rebels defeat the regime's well-armed military. He spoke at the United States Institute for Peace, saying that opposition forces need efficient weapons to face these attacks, including air raids, so they can change the balance of power on the ground. Jarba is to hold high-level talks this week with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and National Security Chief Susan Rice. He is also urging the international community to unite to stop Syrian President Bashar al-Assad as he runs for office, condemning next month's elections as a farce that would give Assad license to kill for many years to come. As for the Nusra Front, Jarba said his group doesn't recognize the al-Qaeda affiliate, while noting that it was unlike ISIS actually engage it in fighting regime troops. Coming up next, another Boko Haram attack kills hundreds in the northeastern part of Nigeria, and terrorism expert Max Abrahams comments. Stay with us. Welcome back. Another Boko Haram attack kills hundreds in the northeastern part of Nigeria as the search continues for more than 200 schoolgirls held hostage by the armed group. The latest attack targeted the town of Gomborungala on the border with Cameroon, where gunmen earlier this week razed scores of buildings and fired on civilians as they tried to flee. Area Senator Ahmed Zana put the death toll at 300 in an account supported by numerous residents. Zana said the town had been left unguarded because soldiers based there had been redeployed north towards Lake Chad in an effort to rescue the more than 200 girls kidnapped by Boko Haram on April 14th. The mass abduction has sparked global outrage and offers of help from the United States, Britain, France, and China. And here to discuss this further, live from Boston, Massachusetts, is terrorism expert and professor at Northeastern University, Max Abrahams. Max, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Happy to be with you.
Thank you for being with us. The town that was attacked was the place where the soldiers looking for the missing girls were based, and Boko Haram seems to attack anyone who comes in their way. Is there any way to stop this group?
Well, a lot of things are going to have to change to stop this group. Right now, Boko Haram is pretty much doing whatever it wants in Nigeria, and largely because the government and government forces are being extremely incompetent in terms of cracking down on this group. Sometimes the government overreacts, and in attempting to harm Boko Haram, actually harms the local population, and that breeds, distrust of the government. In other cases, though, the government doesn't seem to be doing much at all. So the government sometimes overreacts, sometimes underreacts. I'll give you an example. In the northeastern part of the country is a forest where it's widely speculated that Boko Haram is hiding out, using it as a safe haven. Indeed, maybe the abducted schoolgirls are based there, and yet for whatever reason, the government has refused to go in there and clean that area out. And so until the government gets serious about cracking down on Boko Haram, it's going to continue to perpetrate these mass casualty attacks.
Yet we know that the U.S. team sent to assist with the search for the missing girls, according to U.S. President Barack Obama, consists of military, law enforcement, and other agencies. Can this help the government at all now that it's become an international issue?
Marginally. This is largely token support. The team that will be dispatched to Nigeria is comprised of fewer than 10 U.S. soldiers. And so make no mistake, the purpose of the U.S. assistance is not to counter Boko Haram, it's to help in surveillance, simply in terms of locating these abducted schoolgirls.
They keep saying that the group, Boko Haram, the members who try to negotiate, it's been said, with the government get beheaded, and that they will not negotiate for truce with anybody they deem infidels. So what is it that they're asking for? What is it that they want? Because they're not asking for money, so...
Right. That's a very good question. Basically, the nature of terrorism more generally has changed. Up until the 1990s, we were accustomed to seeing terrorist groups who would issue, very clear, narrow demands. And it was widely understood that they were using violence in order to achieve government concessions. Today's terrorist groups are often very different. They're often of a religious character. Many of the attacks are anonymous. And when demands are issued at all, which is the minority of cases, they tend to be, expansive demands like, we want Sharia law, which, governments are not going to
right, but which is what Boko Haram wants to do. That's what they've been talking about. This is why,
There has never been a terrorist group, certainly not since 1968, that issues these kinds of expansive demands and has actually managed to achieve them. The larger the demands issued, the lower the likelihood of government concessions. And so the idea that, the Nigerian government is going to somehow cave into Boko Haram and, establish Sharia law as like the national religion or ideology is absolutely absurd. That said, it is possible that Boko Haram will receive what are sometimes called redemptive demands rather than strategic demands.
Well, I think, okay,
yeah.
I think, sorry to cut you, I think the most important question here is, do you believe that these girls, there's any chance that these girls are going to be rescued? Because they've already threatened to sell them, to marry them off. So what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I've done a study on hostage taking and what are the factors that make governments more likely to give concessions to the hostage takers. And the key takeaway from that study is that if the hostage takers do not harm the hostages, they're significantly more likely to achieve their demands. And so my strong recommendation to any hostage takers, including Boko Haram, would be do not harm the hostages, do not harm the schoolgirls, because if they do, it will lower the likelihood of government concessions. So I'm not really sure what Boko Haram will do in this case, but if it protects the safety of the hostages, it will be rewarded more likely.
So just in conclusion here, basically, what I'd like to know is, do you think at all, okay, we don't know where they are, they could be spread out, but what I'm trying to say is that there has been cases in the past of these girls being abducted, found pregnant because of rape, have had babies because of rape. In this situation, there are over 250 girls missing. Is there any chance of retrieving them at this point after April?
I don't think that it's going to be sort of an all or nothing thing, sort of like either the captives will be unharmed or they will be harmed. I think that they've been divided up into smaller, more manageable groups in order to hide them. I bet some of them have been harmed. I bet some of them have been sort of sold into marriage for $12. I'm seeing reports of that. Others are probably not harmed. And so that makes tracking them down more difficult because they're probably dispersed throughout that forest, and indeed some of them have probably been taken outside of the country already.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. I guess we're going to have to follow up on this story as time goes by. That was Max Abrahams, live from Boston, Massachusetts, the terrorism expert, talking to us about Boko Haram in Nigeria. And on that note, I'm going to remind you of our headlines today. Lebanese Forces Chief Samir Jaja gets ready to withdraw from the presidential race if a deal is reached to back the candidacy of another March 14 alliance member. The Syndicate Coordination Committee launches a week-long and nationwide strike to protest the proposal of a ministerial parliamentary committee to cut the raise by $700 million. An explosion in northern Syria hits the Carlton Hotel that government troops use as a military base, along with several other buildings in a government-held area. As far as your Thursday headlines live on Future Television in Beirut, I'm Nina Nofal, wishing you a good night. Take care.
الغياب ليس مستغربا.
اللي عم بصير 7 أيار بشكل آخر.